One of the biggest benefits to using GraphQL is the type system. When working with libraries such as GraphQL Request, these often accept generics where we can pass the shape of the data and any variables that will infer the shape of the response in the data that we get. So here we have an example where we make a request using the GraphQL Request library to an endpoint. Because we've got no types and we're not using any generics just yet, when we go to access any of the properties of cart, we don't get any autocompletion or any type safety. If we wanted to, we could manually create the types for this request and pass it through the generic to request. So here, let's create a new response object, and we'll specify here that cart contains a ID, which is of type string, and total items, which is of type number. We'll skip creating all of the types for the items and the subtotal. We can now see that this cart has an ID and total items. So when we go to access one of those properties, we can now get some useful information about the type here. We can see that the ID is of type string and total items is of the type number. Managing these types manually is very time consuming and can often lead to dead code. We can forget to update the types, and some of the types may change if there's any underlying break and changes from the API that we're using. So today, let's improve this by using the GraphQL code generator. This property here of the query, if we pass in a document node, can automatically infer the generics that can be used in the response. And it also works for the variables. Let's install the GraphQL code generator, CLI, as a dev dependency. Then let's also install the GraphQL TypeScript plugin, as well as installing the client preset plugin. Once those have installed, let's create the file codegen.ts inside the root of our project. Then, instead of here, we'll create a new config object and export that as the default. We'll need to provide a few properties here, including the schema and the documents, as well as the plugins that we want to use. So here we'll pass the endpoint to our API, and this could be any GraphQL API. Then we'll specify the documents, and here I'll provide an array. And for now, we'll use the main.ts file. Then we'll pass the generates configuration. We'll create this folder here, GQL, and we'll use the preset client with no plugins. Next, if we open the package.json, and inside of our scripts, we create the script codegen, and we run GraphQL codegen, this will automatically create the types for us. We can also create an alternative script which watches for any changes and creates those files on the fly. Now with our configuration saved, let's open the terminal and run npm run codegen. We can now see in the root of our project that we have some new files created. If we open the graphql.ts file, we can see something similar to if you've used the GraphQL code generator before. We are using type document node to generate all of the type documents, and we have the exported scalars as well as all of the different types for our GraphQL API. If we scroll to the bottom of this file, we can see that we have a getCartById document. This is a type document node. And if we scroll up, we can see that we have some type variables and the query. This is automatically detected inside of our project that we have this query here. We can see if we hover over cart here that this is still of the type any, and this is because we're not specifying here that we want to use that type document node. The GraphQL code generator was smart enough to create the type automatically. We'll then need to import a special function called GQL from the generated GraphQL folder, so we can use function overloading in TypeScript to automatically generate the types for us that we can use and pass to GraphQL request. Now let's import GraphQL from our generated GraphQL folder. We can then take this GraphQL function and we can pass it here. Then instead of parentheses, we can pass our query. Now if we hover over cart, when we make a request to our API, we can see that this is using the types that were generated automatically for us. And just like before, we get all the different fields that are available inside of our query here. If we now update our query to include the item's ID and the unit total, formatted and raw amount, if we rerun the code gen, or we watch for any changes, this will automatically update that typed document node. Then if we check one of our items, we should now see that we have the ID, line total, name, quantity, and that unit total. Then if we go to access that, we can see that we have the amount, which is a number, automatically typed for us. Depending on the source that we pass to our GraphQL function, this will return the correct type from our documents object here. This technique is known as function overloading. You can learn more about that inside of the documentation for the code generator, and in another video, we'll learn more about fragments and fragment masking using the client set preset plugin from GraphQL Code Generator.